So we were just talking about the impacts and how difficult they are to quantify. Now, in community banking, the process of validating the adequacy of IT security has traditionally fallen on the shoulders of audit. Audit is a control that validates the adequacy of other controls. But even given the trends that we just spoke about, the audit process has remained largely the same. A typical IT audit focuses on controls as they relate to policies and procedures. And the general consensus out there right now is that the complexity of modern IT environments requires a little bit more than that. So, what does it mean? IT risk in one slide. Disasters don't happen because of a single isolated event. Okay? The BP oil rig explosion in the Gulf didn't happen because one guy forgot to change one seal on the drill. Right? The credit crisis didn't happen because banks wrote a couple of bad loans. Right? When things go wrong, it's usually multiple forces coming together in a way that wasn't anticipated. Here's an example of some of the forces I just spoke about. We have increasing attacks. We have increasing reliance on technology. We have increasing usage of outsourcing. We have impacts that are difficult to quantify, making risk assessment difficult. And we have an audit function that's remained largely the same. And really, what does that mean? These things converge together. That's our risk in IT. Now, given all of those things, what's the response? What should the audit process be looking for to ensure compliance, to ensure security going forward? Now, audit is a very important IT security control, and that it validates things like incident response planning, disaster recovery, business continuity planning, governance, board reporting, right? All very important IT controls. However, a lot of the controls that a typical IT audit focuses on are reactionary in nature. That is, they're designed to mitigate exposure after an incident occurs. Really, what has to happen is that the audit programs, the IT audit programs, have to be expanded to include the examination of controls that allow for proactive, real-time responses to attacks, not really geared specifically all towards reactionary controls. They really have to balance that emphasis. Okay, so on the one hand, you have all of the things that you would typically do in an IT audit, disaster recovery and business continuity planning and all these things. But on the other hand, the examination of new controls, controls that allow for the bank to respond in real time. Now, I can tell you that most of the audit programs that are out right now are skewed towards the former. Up on the screen here, though, I have a couple of examples of controls that are very proactive in nature. Now, we're kind of pressed for time today. I'm not going to go into them specifically, but the point to take from this slide is that these controls are preventive. Okay, they're not reactive. They're designed to attack and stop an attack before it can gain legs. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that the complexity of modern IT infrastructures requires more. This is the more. Okay, the days of auditors coming into your bank and taking screenshots of your password policy off your domain controller are over. Okay, they're done. The IT infrastructures, even of small community banks now, are too complicated, they're too fluid, and the vulnerabilities are emerging too quickly to effectively audit them manually. So a vulnerability assessment is a technical assessment of the controls using a computer. Okay? We're not sampling anymore. These types of assessments allow us to extract all of the settings on every machine connected to the bank's network, every piece of software that's installed on every machine in the bank's network, every vulnerability in every piece of software installed on the bank's network. It's just not practical to audit that manually. If your auditors don't have the technical capability to perform these assessments themselves, then you should hire somebody to do it for you. Your auditors can attest to the results and to your remediation efforts. So that takeaway point there is important. The days of manual auditing are done. Oops. Redefining the vendor relationship. Okay, the reality of IT and community banking is that outsourcing is here to stay. It's not going away. Right? Outsourcing allows us to gain expertise at a reasonable cost. Okay, it allows us to focus on the business of banking, right, on what you do. Now, here's the rub. When you outsource, you can't outsource your responsibility, right? And you're going to say, I know that, right? I get my SAS 70s. Okay, I get my penetration test performed. But you have to be realistic. How many people in the bank, maybe this applies more to smaller community banks, are really capable of understanding if the scope of a SAS 70 is even adequate? As auditors, what we're looking for you is to take, what we're looking for from you is for you to take your relationships with your vendors to the next level. Don't say, I got my SAS 70, check. I did my pen test 2 times this year, check, check. Right? Gain an understanding of what you're looking at. Okay, make these vendors explain the mitigating controls to you. I'll give you an example. If you have a penetration test done, you get this report. It's a complicated report. Turn around, talk to your network management vendor and say, hey, explain this to me. What does this mean? Make me comfortable that I have mitigating controls in place. The important part is that you document that process with the vendor. Document everything. Treat these vendors as management tools. And use your auditors in the process. If you're having a problem understanding this, right, if it's difficult, get the third-party attestation. Right? This is what happens. Nobody cares when things are going well. Right? And this is particularly relevant to IT. Nobody has a problem. Right? But the second something goes wrong, finger pointing starts. Right? What do you mean you didn't validate the adequacy of the scope of this SAS 70? It says right here. Okay? I think that what you really, as management, what you have to be cognizant of is that you have to always be in a position where you can demonstrate that you did all you can do. Document, document, document. Now, one of the most difficult things for a community bank to do is to balance the efficiency we need from IT with the security that IT requires. Okay? Efficiency and security have an inverse relationship. You can be really secure, or you can be really efficient. You can't be both. Okay? So it's like a scale, or a seesaw. If you imagine on one hand, you have one side you have efficiency, the other side you have security, or you can be really secure, and you can be not so efficient. Right? So for example, I can unplug my internet connection from the wall. Okay? I'm pretty secure, right? But probably not that efficient. Community banks tend to favor efficiency over security. Why? We have cost limitations. We have time limitations. We spoke about quantifying impact and assessing risk. Sometimes if we don't assess the risk properly, we underestimate the security requirements that are required. So what we're really looking to do is find a balance between the security and the efficiency. How do we do it? One way is in the organizational structure. Now, I'm going to use these C-level titles here to illustrate my point. I know that they may not apply to a smaller community bank. In a bigger community bank, you may call them something else. But I think I'll be able to make the point in a way that you understand. The thing to understand here in this structure is that the Chief Information Officer, this is the guy who cares about efficiency. Okay? He's the one who cares about using technology to increase the bottom line. The Information Security Officer, right, this is the person who cares about security. Okay? They have competing goals, these people. Remember the seesaw. In a vertical organizational structure like this, efficiency wins out because the security guy is in the subordinate position. A more modern structure looks like this. In this structure, the efficiency and the security are on the same plane of the organizational chart. This allows that decision maker, in my example here, the CEO, to be confident that he's getting both sides of the argument are equally weighted in his decision-making process. Now, in a community bank, there may be one person who does all these things, right? And that person may even be the BSA officer, right? Maybe they shovel the snow, right? That's kind of what happens in community banks, right? I think the thing to understand here is that as you grow, okay, as you grow and as security becomes more important to your operations, you can think about creating positions and pushing responsibility down. When you do, think about this structure. So what does it all mean? There are two sides to the IT security picture. Okay? On the one hand, we have reactionary controls. This is all of the stuff that we traditionally handle in an information technology audit. We also have these new preventive controls. These are the things like the vulnerability assessments, the intrusion detection systems on the slide that I showed before, the modern management structure, really pushing your vendors. Audit has to consider both of these because IT and security in your organization is both. If you're doing one or the other, you only get half the picture. So let me give you an example from an actual audit that we performed earlier this year. Okay, this was a first-time audit for us.